We're trying to reach
God
people.
can still use those people.
Exactly. And that's why I want to be careful of that, because I want to be encouraging to others,
Yeah.
because I want, if you're not a believer and you're watching this podcast, I want you to see this and say, okay, if I was a believer, I could still do those things. Or even if I'm
Yeah.
not a believer, like I'm a good leader, but you know, I could expand my
Okay.
leadership and become a better leader by following Christ.
Yeah, I would. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Well, I'll put it this way: a leader who is not following Christ is not reaching their full potential.
Oh, I like that. Yeah, see, we're getting somewhere now.
Yeah.
Yeah, perfect. Say it again.
A leader who is not following Christ is not reaching their full potential.
Boom, mic drop, except we're not actually dropping the mic.
Hey, to whoever may need this nugget of encouragement, things will be alright, so quit your worrying. I get it, the odds seem stacked back against the wall, but even consider it such, know you'll stand tall. Sat and watch from the sidelines, one too many times. Wicked games we play make me wanna lose my mind. Found solitude, knowing it'll be over soon. Ever need a boost, count on me for the 1-2. Trouble don't last when the tough get going.
What is up, everybody? Welcome back to a Jar of Life podcast. We're happy to be back today. I'm your host, Jonah Ross. It's my co-host, Chris Anderson. And today, we're going to hop right into it. We're going to be talking about leadership today. So, I don't know. We'll see where this goes. Maybe not a deep topic, but an important topic.
For sure.
Right?
For sure.
And so, I want to start off with saying that me and Chris both are leaders in a sense in our church group. And I would say outside of our church group in other areas for sure. And I'll start with me. For me, I'm a leader here. I'm a leader. I'm a leader here on this podcast, but we help each other lead. I'm not saying I'm leading y'all, but I'm saying that in a sense we are all leaders because we are trying to lead a podcast and we're trying to lead others to Christ through this podcast. I would say I'm a leader at home. I have two little sisters that look up to me that I have to set an example for. And I know you have the same. You have how many siblings?
Oh goodness, math is very hard. I have 5.
Yeah.
5 of them.
Well, are you the oldest?
I'm like the middle.
You're the middle. So you have two younger or
I have
three.
3 younger and 2 older.
Three. So you have 3 younger siblings that look up to you, right?
Yes.
And that you intend to be an example for.
100%.
Right. And so leadership is just super important in that sense. And like even outside, so at work, I have a job that I got with my engineering degree that I'm finishing up, but I'm still at the bottom of the food chain. Right now I'm just an intern. But there are ways that I can still lead and exemplify the faith through the way I act at work, right? And so what areas do you lead in?
I mean, you pointed out the family, you pointed out the podcast. Those are great, examples of leading, and you pointed out in our church group being a leader. But also in the Marine Corps, I've got a lot of leadership that I have to, do. Whether that be people that are above me or below me, eyes are on me and they're seeing how I act. And especially as a Christ follower in the Marine Corps, very few and far between. So when people, I might be the only example of Christ that those people get, that once a month that we are together, because I'm in a reserve unit. So a lot of eyes are on me, so I have to be very careful with how I conduct myself and how I lead others and how I act.
Yeah, for sure.
And then also in the workspace that I am, my civilian job, I am a leader. Maybe not as much leadership there as I do have in the Marine Corps, but I still have to be a leader because I am questioned pretty much every single day that I'm there. I'm questioned in my faith. And there's a lot of things that I could definitely improve on at my job, but there's also a lot of areas that I feel like I'm pretty good in.
Yeah.
But overall, just being a leader and being an example, because that's people see that, and I notice that I'm talked to differently by coworkers and stuff because of the way that I act and hold myself. So
Yeah, for sure. I'm kind of in the same boat, and I'll even take it a step further, and then I have a question I want to ask you. I actually technically have two jobs now. One of them is like not. It's not. They're both part time, but one job takes up a lot more time than the other. But my other job is a drumline instructor, and so I only have to go to a few rehearsals, a couple rehearsals a week, plus the games and the competitions that they have to go to. And so, although that's not a lot of time, it's a very important role because I'm guiding students, I'm teaching students, I'm leading them in the right direction. And that is not only through drumming. That's not only teaching the technique that we have to know, the how to build chops as a drummer, all that. So as we do that, as I'm teaching this drumline, I'm also trying to instill in them other leadership qualities, right? I want to teach them how to go from being a follower to being a leader. Now, that also kind of leads me into another topic that we may dive into a little bit more later, but some people are called to be followers, some people are called to be leaders. Not everybody is called to be a leader, but I will say this, everybody is a leader in the sense of their actions. And so you may just be a follower in a sense of the definition of a follower. You may not be leading a group, you may be following a leader in a group, but by being a good follower, you are leading the other followers in the group.
Yeah, exactly. And as a good follower, you're willing to call out the leader when he may slip or whenever he doesn't do
Yeah.
something the right way or has a has a corrective action that you need to talk to him about. And I would say as a good leader, you want followers like that who have those leadership traits that they're willing to follow you, but they're also willing to correct you and make you a better leader.
Yeah, for sure. And so you mentioned the Marine Corps.
Mhm.
I wanted to ask you, number one, what led you to join the Marines?
Okay, so little background story. It was probably 100 and something degrees outside, and I was working on the turf field, so it was blazing hot. But I was sitting there, and then I got a phone call from my stepbrother, who is also a Marine. We went through boot camp together, and he was like, "Hey
I
man,"
didn't know that.
he was like, "Hey man, you should come down to the office and talk to the recruiter." And I was like, "What are you talking about?" He was like, "Yeah, dude. I mean, you told me you thought about joining, right?" And I was like, "I mean, I've considered it as an option in my life."
Yeah.
And he was like, "Well, you should come talk to him." And I was like, thinking about it as a joke. And then I was like,
Mm-hmm.
"Yeah, I'll go down there, right?"
Yeah.
So then I went down there and I talked to the recruiter, and he's giving me his best, like, "Oh, the Marine Corps is great,"
Mhm.
But I wasn't really, whatever. It was kind of like, where do I need to be in my life spiritually? And then I just had this presence. I just felt like God was saying, "Hey, go, like sign that and go."
Mm-hmm.
Just like trust me with everything else. You just go, because I was super like know
Yeah.
about it. And then I was like, "God, are you sure?" Like, "God, what?" And he was like, "Go." And I was like, "Oh my goodness." And I was like, "Okay, when would I leave?" And they were like, "Well, we could get you out of here in like 9 days." And I was like, "What?" For anyone who's ever joined the Marine Corps, they know that is extremely fast. Usually people sit in, wait to go to boot camp for months and months, like
Mhm.
up to upwards of 8 to 10 months. But mine was
Mhm.
9 days turnaround. And think about it, like I
Dang.
live in my regular civilian life, and then I go to the recruiter's office, and all of a sudden in 9 days I'm going off to boot
All
camp.
of a sudden, your life is going in a
Oh,
different
I'm a
direction.
completely different direction. I'm leaving everything
Because
behind.
that's not just something that you can continue your normal life
Yeah.
with. You're completely flipping everything.
Yes, and I was talking to a girl at that time too, so it's kind of like, "Hey, I'm gone,"
Yeah,
like,
oh, man.
deuces, like.
Oh man, bro.
But anyway,
Oh man.
so yeah, I was just like, "Hey, all right, I'll go,
Yeah.
God." So
Yeah.
I went, and it was one of the best decisions I've ever made in my life. And I wouldn't. People ask,
Crazy what you get from listening to God, bro.
I know, right?
Man.
At first, when I got there, I was getting, yelled at by a guy because I'm 22.
Mhm.
So when I went through boot, I was 20. I turned 21 in boot camp. So when everyone
Mhm.
else is celebrating their 21st, I was getting hazed, doing push-ups and getting screamed at and saying "yes, sir." So
Oh man.
yeah, fun times. Uh, so whenever I went, usually people who go are like 17, 18 years
Mm.
old, fresh out of high school. So people that were staff sergeants were like 21, 22 years old, which is crazy, by the way, because that means that they ranked up extremely quick. So I was getting yelled at by people my age or just a little bit older than me, which was, I was like, why am I here? Like,
Yeah,
why did I make
yeah.
this decision?
I cannot imagine being.
Oh yeah,
like,
and like they're just in your face screaming at you, like spit's coming out of their
especially
mouth.
like being the same age, like,
Yes.
or
And-
even just like a year or two apart.
Yeah.
That would be crazy to
Mm.
me. I'd be like, boy, who you talking to?
I,
We the
I
same
know, right?
age."
Like, dog. But you don't want to say that because they're scary, you know?
Yeah.
Uh,
He said they're scary.
they're scary, man.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was like, and then that same night, you went from having your beautiful, luscious hair to they just,
Oh,
and then
man.
you're just completely bald,
Yeah.
and you're just like, I lost my hair. Like, I look like an idiot right now.
I did that by choice, so.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but yeah. So what led me to go was just God.
Okay.
So.
Nice, dude. Okay, so what when you went into the military, were you like scared about possibly I guess maybe not losing your faith, but going down a hole you didn't that you might not come back from, or it might be hard to come back from?
I knew that it was gonna be tested,
Mhm.
but I was optimistic in the fact that it would kind of hopefully change my perspective on life and help me strengthen some weaker areas in my life,
Yeah, for sure.
and some of my weaker characteristics, and like such as just and I figured like some of the fruits of the spirit, like self-control.
Mhm.
The Marine Corps is so huge on discipline, and part of that is having self-control. So I was
Yeah.
like optimistic that it would, really strengthen some of those core values that
Mhm.
that God has. But I was also scared of the other side of things, knowing that the Marine Corps is very vulgar a lot of times, and that Christ is not really present
Mhm.
amongst Marines. At least is very rare. Um, so it was
Is
scary.
it that he's not present, or is it that like were there other believers there, and was there other people that said they believed in God, they just didn't act it because of the
There's-
Marine
there are
stereotype, or
you know the difference as a Christ follower.
absolutely.
I would say out of everybody in the platoon, we had out of everyone that I had in the platoon, either they quit or failed or dropped from another platoon ahead of us and came into ours.
Mhm.
Which, by the way, we had like a 50% drop rate. It's crazy.
Oh my god.
Some of them might have graduated late, but yeah, like half the people that I started with, I did not finish with. I didn't drop anything. I went through 13 weeks and got out.
Mm.
But out of all of those people, I met one other person that was really entrenched in their faith. And so that person was, a cornerstone for me during that time.
Absolutely.
But out of the 100 and maybe 40 to 50 people that I met through boot camp and through, MCT was another 300. And out of all those people, maybe one person, I'd say, was, really, really trying to live out their faith and
Mhm.
convicted of messing up and in their Bible.
Yeah. Wow. So, would you say? Yeah, well, let me just ask you this: how did you get through all that, and how did you? And after you answer that, how did you apply leadership qualities to trying to spread your devoutness of the faith?
I'd-
And did you? Did
I
you
would
try to
say-
do that?
I would say at first, it was like in boot camp, it kind of felt like every man for themselves at first.
I was
so
about to say, I assume it's probably pretty scary too, because I mean, just going out in the normal world, it's like, even like I get scared sometimes, like to go talk to some of the other guys in the engineering department, like, hey, why don't you just come to church? And like that is nothing, probably nothing compared to what like you were experiencing every day for that amount of time.
yeah, it was very rough. I mean, most people went to church, during boot camp
Mhm.
because it was an hour to an hour and a half away from your drill instructors because they couldn't mess with you during church. So actually, the church attendance was pretty much 100% during
Wow.
boot camp. So that's really cool.
Dang.
Honestly,
That's crazy.
honestly, it's one of my favorite services that I've ever been a part of
Really?
because you have, I mean, however many Marines are at boot camp at that moment with all the companies, they come together
Mhm.
and we're all in a huge building and we're worshiping Jesus together. And
Did that worship, was it like really good? Like was everybody singing? Was everybody
I really like the singing because the songs are godly songs, and you
Uh-huh.
can and it's kind of singing
But
is
did,
kind of
did
like
everybody like participate
yes, but
for the most part?
some of the
at least?
some people would like they just like sang the songs and they were just kind of there to have fun because
Yeah.
it was the one time they could laugh and joke around without their drill instructor, making
Yeah.
them go do push-ups on the front quarterdeck.
Yeah.
So, but it was fun. If you focus on yourself, then singing was what you got out of it. It's all about what you put into it is what you get out of it. So I could sit there and sing and praise Jesus, and everyone else, around me is having a good time. So just everyone, just knowing that God's presence was in the room and it was good. Because where Christ says, if two people congregate in my name, I'll be there, or the Holy Spirit will be there. So just knowing that there's at least a couple other Christ followers in the room that were all, actually
Absolutely.
worshiping Jesus,
Yeah.
and just everyone else, whether they were there listening or not, they were at least in a room where the Holy Spirit was present and we were worshiping.
Mhm.
So, but it was fun. It was fun.
So did those services? Well, okay. What would you say helped you get through the most? Like, helped you stay on course and on track with Christ?
So I had my own Bible because
Mhm.
that was one of the things that they couldn't take from you is that if you brought a pocket-sized Bible, they you could keep that.
Mhm.
But so I had my
I would
own
hope so.
I had my own Bible,
Yeah.
and I think it might have only been New Testament, but
Mhm.
I had something, and every night I would try to read my Bible before I went to bed. So you would all stand in line, and they'd be like, "Get in your racks, eyes
Yeah.
there." You get in your racks. You're all standing there at attention. You have to sit
Uh-huh.
in attention at your racks. It's kind of crazy. Lights would go out, and then the drill instructors would kind of go away. Fire watch would, come out because you
Mhm.
had to have people up all night at all times, at least three, roaming or at the front or the back. Which crazy story that we can get into in a second if you want to. But I would sit there and read my Bible before I went to bed. I would make sure I took some time to sit
Absolutely.
there and read
That's
it.
good, dude. That's good.
And for a time, before I became a squad leader, which again, for Marine people to understand, for other people they won't, it's a leadership position, which is what we're talking about.
Exactly. Yeah.
But before I became a squad leader, I was racked beside the guy who also was in his faith. So me and him would sit there and read our Bibles
Really.
beside each other every single night,
Wow.
or at least try to every single night.
So that's crazy. Like, and I'm sure y'all were assigned your racks, right? Or
At,
did y'all pick?
at first, we were able to kind of pick because the drill instructors didn't really know anybody. So if you just
Did
kind
you
of like,
really know anybody?
I went with my stepbrother and his best friend. So we all three were in the same
So
platoon together.
But the other guy that you said was
I didn't know him
You
before boot
didn't.
camp.
Okay, so that's kind of the point I was trying to get to. Like, that's crazy.
We ended up
God
racking
put you
beside
there,
each
bro.
other. We ended up racking beside each other.
That's God. That's all God, bro. He
Mhm.
said these two guys need to be together.
And what's crazy is that like I had no clue who he was before that moment, and
Mhm.
so whenever we carried all of our stuff, so we were on the third deck. So whenever we carried all of our stuff up there was a guy who was so physically like weak, he just couldn't actually lift his stuff. So I was carrying my rifle, his rifle, and for everyone who knows what a sea bag is, I was carrying 3 sea bags. So I had one on my back, one on my front, and one on my arms.
Mm.
That was horrendous.
Oh my gosh. Dude.
And so, yeah. And I was carrying another white bag with me. Everyone who's been to boot camp knows exactly what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
And so I didn't know the drill instructors at that point. So whenever I was carrying all that stuff up, I was the last person up because I was basically falling out in the back of the platoon because I had so much stuff I was carrying for so long. And I started walking up the stairs, and I had like dropped something, and I looked at the drill instructor and I was like, "This recruit requests help, sir." For anyone who's in the Marine Corps, that's the last thing you should ever do is request help from a drill instructor. I started going up the stairs, last one up the stairs, and the drill instructor's like, "Hey, recruit who asked for help." "Hi, sir." He has a bag in his hand, drops it on the ground. He says, "Come pick this up." I'm halfway up the stairs.
Yeah.
I'm carrying 3 bags, 4 with the white one, 2 rifles, and I got to go back down the stairs and pick up another bag.
Dang, bro.
So I went back down the stairs, picked up that bag, and went all the way back up. So I was the last one in there. Last one in there, and I dropped all my stuff. I was exhausted when I got up there, which I was being dramatic. I was exhausted, so I was the last person to pick my rack.
Yeah.
So that rack was the only rack left open, and it was the one beside him.
That's crazy, dude. So that is wow. That's all God, bro. Because I mean, think about that. Think about the chances of you being beside that one guy that you would say was as devout as you were. That is God giving you a cornerstone in that situation. And it's great to see the evidence of that. And I want everybody to hear that evidence. I want everybody to hear the story that he just told. Like, how many did you say? How many people or how
Whenever
many?
we started out, we had 100.
Yeah, I mean 100. So 2 out of the 100 people, including Chris, were devout Christians, and somehow he got placed with that one other person. He got placed in that rack beside him, and without that happening, with the carrying all that stuff, and then having to go back down the steps, getting that bag, and then go back up, without that happening,
I wouldn't have gotten the rack.
You probably wouldn't have gotten the rack beside him.
It's crazy.
That's a testament, bro.
Oh,
That is amazing. So when it comes to so were those services that you went to, were those a good cornerstone in your faith, or was it more of just something that you did to get away from the
I went at first because I wanted to go to church. I mean, you get through your first week and you're like, "Man, I need Jesus."
Yeah.
I need him. And so I went for the first couple weeks, probably the first 4 or 5 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
But they were always Marine Corps orientated, like, "Oh, you got to be a soldier the same way you're, for the Marine Corps, love Jesus so that you can be a good Marine." And I'm like, I can't stand this. This is not this is not church. I don't come in here and I'm not conflicted to change my ways and become better, for Jesus. I'm in here getting a pep talk about how to be spiritually fit so that I can be a good Marine.
Gotcha.
So that they can get what they want out of me.
Okay.
So I actually ended up stopped going to church, and I actually just did my own Bible study inside the what are they called, squad base. I just did a little Bible study, and eventually some people stopped going to church, and they would sit there with me and join my little Bible study. So,
really.
Yeah.
So in a sense, you were already leading then.
Trying to
at least.
I definitely was very far from perfect in boot camp. So
that's okay. I feel like a lot of people do probably fall down that rabbit hole when they go to boot camp. If not everybody. And I applaud you.
Thank you
for persevering through that, man. That's amazing.
If the Marines watching this, they're probably like, "Dude, boot camp is so easy. Like, this guy's an idiot." And, looking back on it, it is easy compared to some of the things that we have to do.
Yeah.
But from the civilian perspective, they're like, "Wow, you're a Marine."
Yeah.
But I got you. Yeah.
Well, man, I applaud you for that. But so you said you became a squad leader. Is that what you?
Yes.
So okay. So I want you to kind of give me a quick rundown of how you got to that position, and then what you did in that position.
So a squad leader is it's just somebody who leads one of the so you have 4 ranks in a platoon, and each one has a squad leader at the front of it. And I was one of those for maybe 2 weeks. I got fired. Not my fault. I'll elaborate. But yeah, so during that so how I got to that position was people are naturally willing to follow taller people. So that was probably one thing. Madison told me about that. I know I wasn't thinking about that.
I would not have ever
thought
about that.
When someone naturally looks up to you because you're tall, they're more willing to follow you.
Mm-hmm.
Which kind of is a testament to Jesus because he was short, right? Jesus was 5'5". something like that.
I don't remember, but
I don't want to
do.
speak blasphemy, but
I
remember
feel
him
like I
being-
do remember
I
that,
remember
but
him
I'm
being,
not
like, but anyways,
not completely sure. But yeah.
anyways, so yeah, but I was just, I tried to do the right thing. I felt like I was a pretty good Marine compared to
Mhm.
most, at least during boot camp. So whenever one of the squad leaders was, being a little butthole, drill instructor fired him and was like, you're a new squad leader. Can you handle it? And I was like, yes, sir. So squad leader. During that time, I was actually really sick because boot camp, all these people come from all different places across America, and they're all sleeping together in the same room.
Yeah.
You get sick.
Yeah. I
So
mean, it's bound to
I
happen,
ended up
yeah.
losing my voice most of the time that I was a squad leader. So it was actually really hard for me to be a good leader during that time. But I tried my best, and I tried to take a different approach to it.
Mhm.
I tried to take a nicer approach, a more Christ-like approach to being a leader. But that doesn't fly in boot camp. They want a mean person as the leader because that's the most enforcing, and that's what most people are going to listen to because they feel like they have to.
Yeah.
So I didn't last long as a squad leader, unfortunately. Got
Yeah.
fired.
Dang. Well,
I tried.
yeah, it's all good. Yeah, but I'm glad that you mentioned that. Taking the Christ-like approach, because that's the way we want to lead, right? Is we want to be Christ-like, and we want to follow Christ as who was the ultimate leadership example, right? And as a Christian, that's all we're wanting to do the whole time is be um, be an example to others of living a life for Christ. And so I kind of want to switch directions just a little bit now. Thank you for sharing all that, bro. I appreciate it. I hope some of y'all got a little something out of that. I sure did. But I do want to switch directions a little bit here. I want to talk about, and I'll start with this, but I want to talk about how we got into leadership, and I want to talk about anything that we've gone, and I think the Marines have helped you a lot in the sense of leadership and learning leadership qualities.
But sometimes you have to you're more direct in the Marine Corps. So like whenever I go on stage and I'm talking about, beat ups or whatever in our community, and I'm like, hey, listen up. I have to change the way that I approach people. Because, when you're looking at someone, you're like, hey, listen up. It's like too approaching. You know what I mean? Too direct.
Too direct, yeah.
And that's what it is like in the Marine Corps. So, but when I'm talking to civilians, I need to switch that. I need to be like, hey, can I please have y'all's attention real quick?
Yeah.
So I would say that, yes, the Marine Corps gives me a lot of leadership traits, but I've been having to learn how to be different in the civilian life because it's a big change.
Yeah, I'm sure it is. So I'm going to kind of talk about how I've kind of grown up, and I think that I can truly say that I think God has given me a gift of leadership and being a good leader, and having good leadership qualities. And I'm not saying that I naturally got that, but I do think that God is calling me to be a leader in many different senses. I think I do my best to exemplify Christ and to exemplify what just a good human being should, do in their everyday life. Respecting other leaders, respecting other people, and, just listening to other people, being attentive, all those qualities. And so I'll start with this. In high school, I was in band. I was in marching band, and part of marching band there is like a very big leadership aspect. And I'm not completely sure as to why, but my best guess is because in band you have your drum major, right? Your drum major is the one you see conducting in the whole band. Well, the drum major, not only do they have to be good at conducting, not only do they have to have a good sense of rhythm and timing, but most high schools or most bands in general for that drum major position do leadership interviews. They do interviews to determine if they will be fit to lead the band.
Doesn't the whole band have to go off the drums if I'm not mistaken.
So, I that's a little bit of a tangent, but I'll explain it real quick, just so I'll make sure everybody's on the same page. So the drum line is actually another name for the drum line is the battery, and the reason we call it the battery is because without the drum line, the band would probably fall apart. Not probably, it would in most cases, but the drum line watches the drum major, and the drum major watches the drum line. They coincide with one another, and so the way I teach it is, and the way a lot of band directors teach it is the head drum major. Like if there's more than one drum major, which like with the band that I teach at, there's only one. So me and the band directors there have decided to the best way to teach it is that drum major needs to watch like the best drummer's feet. The drummer who has the best sense of rhythm. And of course, there's always a couple that have really good senses of rhythm, so you can kind of pick and choose. But you watch their feet because your feet are doing quarter notes the whole time while you're marching. And so she looks at their feet, they look at her hands, and it's just a loop. And so they make sure they're in with one another. But something the drumline can't do is, let's say the drumline is not playing at one point, because the drumline is not always playing. The winds and the front ensemble also play at different times. And so the drum major is there to conduct them and to lead them through a piece. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Okay. So back to the example I was trying to give is like, so the drum major, they have to be a leader. It's very important for them to be a leader. And then beyond that, in each section of the band, they have a section leader. Right? And so for drumline, the drumline has a section leader. And even beyond that, each subsection of the drumline has a section leader. So there are 3 subsections in a drumline. There's tenors, bass, and snare. Each one of those has a subsection leader. But then you have a section leader for all 3 of those combined, the whole drumline, who leads warm-ups and stuff like that, does the count-off, whatever. Normally it's the center snare. Okay? So the reason I think that is why leadership is such a big quality in band is because there's so much going around. Now, I'm not saying that sports don't need leadership or anything like that, because they do, obviously, right? You have team captains and stuff like that. But you don't normally see these athletes going to just leadership camps, right? Band, they have like leadership camps, like specifically for leadership. They have speakers who travel the nation to speak and teach leadership qualities. And it's really cool to see. I personally went to, there's this camp in Muncie, Indiana that they do every summer. It's really cool. It's this big band camp. It's called Music for All Summer Symposium. And it's 7 days long. The band part itself is like 5 days long, but then you can choose to go to the 2 or 3 day like leadership camp beforehand. And so I did that every year as well, and I learned a lot from there. So that helped build my leadership abilities, my leadership qualities, and knowing how to lead a group of people. But then also just being in band in general helped with that a lot. But then also being in youth group and becoming, growing up, getting to like my junior and senior year of high school, I became a leader. And at that point, I was working with my youth minister. He taught me a lot of leadership qualities. And so I was getting the band side of things, and I wouldn't say it's just band, but band really harps on it a lot. I was getting that side of things in maybe not a Christ-like sense, but just a good leadership sense. But then I was also getting the church sense and a Christ-like sense of leadership. And I think those two combined have really helped me to become the person I am today. And I think without those things, I wouldn't be the person I am today. Mm-hmm. So what have you, like, what all have you done that you would say has helped you become a leader?
I feel like most people would say sports. Okay. I grew up playing sports.
I'm glad you're elaborating on this, since I just talked about band. Yeah.
But I really didn't lead in sports, actually. I kind of took a back seat, and I wish I did, because it would have made me a lot better player. But I I saw leadership qualities that I liked, and I saw leadership qualities that I didn't like growing up in sports. So I guess in a way that advanced my leadership capabilities that I'm using now that I wasn't using then. But also just the Marine Corps. It really affects your leadership and grows it. During the schoolhouse, I was a class leader, so had I think I only had 14 other Marines.
Yeah.
But still, that's 14 Marines that I have to be accountable for at all times. If Sergeant needs an accountability of all of us, he's calling me. And he's like, hey, I need accountability of all of you, and I need to know where all of your guys are at. And I have to be able to say, hey, I have this guy here, these girls are here, I'm here, this group is here. I have to be accountable for all of those. And if one person is not where they're supposed to be, it falls on me. So I'd say that really advanced my leadership capabilities. And the Marine Corps, it's just really good at that.
Yeah,
That's one of the things that they do best.
for sure.
Is advance your leadership capabilities, because they need those types of things. Like if we go to war, they need leaders. And if every single person is able to lead in a time of war, then you got yourself a really good squad.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I would say that the Marine Corps probably advanced my leadership the most, but also just the urge to lead. I've always felt it, and so I think getting both worlds, being under bad leaders and being submissive to terrible leaders during my time growing up in school and sports and stuff, and then being a good leader in the Marine Corps, at least the best that I could be every single day, and I feel like a lot better than a lot of the ones that I've seen. Getting the best of both worlds is kind of what has made me a better leader.
Yeah,
Not perfect. I don't want to sit here and scratch my own back. There's a lot of ways in which I could definitely be better, and some of that was called out this week by I won't no names, but someone definitely they didn't directly go to me, but it came back around to me, and I was called out about some of the ways that I've not been a good leader. And it would have been easy to be stubborn about it and been like, oh no, like that stuff's whatever, like I'm a good leader. But part of being a good leader was looking at being like, what, they're right.
Self-reflection.
I gotta be, I gotta self-reflect on some of the things that I'm not good at, and now because I'm working to be better at those things, I'm becoming a better leader than what I was yesterday.
And I want to highlight that real quick is being a leader is being able to look at yourself and say, I messed up. I'm going to fix it. Right?
100%. So if you don't mind, I just want to, so I have a worldly leadership to spiritual leadership. It's kind of like what a lot of my notes are. So I'd say worldly leadership, I wrote it down, is to be in a higher position of authority, to possess influence, whether through money or power that others do not possess, to be able to manipulate a crowd to follow your influence by any means, whether it be through dishonesty or truth or partiality of both. And then spiritual leadership is to use your influence to biblically enable people, to allow the Holy Spirit and God to work through you in a way that produces fellowship and following to the calling Jesus has on not only your life, but the people around you as well.
Real quick, can you read the worldly leadership again?
To be in a higher position of authority, to possess influence, whether through money or power that others do not possess, to be able to manipulate a crowd to follow your influence by any means necessary, whether it be through dishonesty or truth or partiality of both.
Okay, I want to elaborate on that because I think there's a big difference. I think the first half of that definition is right, but I think the second half is more of a dictatorship. And so I want to talk about the difference between a leadership and a leader and a dictator, because and dictator in the sense of not Hitler. I'm not saying like dictator in the sense of that. I'm saying dictator in a general sense. So a dictator is someone, as you said in that second half of that definition, is basically. Can you read it again? That second half.
I got you. Here we go. To be able to manipulate a crowd to follow your influence by any means necessary, whether it be through dishonesty or truth or partiality of both.
So I would argue that a dictator is someone who will go to any means necessary. A leader knows there's only one way, or maybe not one way, but there is only the right way. Right. And so I don't think a leader would lead somebody with the dishonesty or anything like that. Now, a dictator would. I think we have to be careful, and you can correct me if you don't, or if
I
you don't
believe
agree.
I believe that a leader that is not following Christ is a bad leader.
I Okay, all right. So let's expand on that then, because I think if we're talking in the sense of, let me use this as an example. So I had a section leader on drumline one year, and I can tell you for a fact that he was not a Christian, but he led our drumline very well. So what would you say to that?
He's very good at what he does. He's very good at drumline.
Mm-hmm.
But at the end of the day, how many people did he lead to eternal salvation?
So
What matters?
no, I mean I agree, and I think
So in did
so can we define it this way then? Can we say there's a difference? Let's have three different categories then. We'll have dictator, leader, and then biblical leader.
Okay.
Can we do that?
Okay.
Because I don't think it's fair necessarily to say that like someone who's not a Christian but has really good leadership qualities is just not a good leader. I don't think that's fair to say, you know what I mean?
Okay. I
And,
think that
and
everything,
I don't want to I don't
if
want
everything they do for if everything they do is not for Christ, it's in vain. But
yeah, but I don't want to I also don't want to, you know, we're trying to reach
God
people.
can still use those people.
Exactly. And that's why I want to be careful of that, because I want to be encouraging to others,
Yeah.
because I want if you are not a believer and you're watching this podcast, I want you to see this and say, okay, if I was a believer, I could still do those things, or even if I'm
Yeah.
not a believer, like I'm a good leader, but I could expand my leadership and become a better leader by following Christ.
Yeah, I would. Yeah. Well,
You know what I mean?
Well, I'll put it this way: a leader who is not following Christ is not reaching their full potential.
Oh, I like that. Yeah, see, we're getting somewhere now. Yeah. Perfect. Say it again.
A leader who is not following Christ is not reaching their full potential.
Boom. Mic drop, except we're not actually dropping the mic. But yeah. Okay. All right. Now that we defined that, continue with your notes.
All right. So I would. So this kind of goes into dictator then,
Mm-hmm.
but I put down what the difference between a worldly leader and a biblical leader, or some of the traits that a worldly leader can possess and still be a worldly leader. A worldly leader can be forceful.
Mm-hmm.
They can be disrespectful.
Mm-hmm.
They can be cloudy, shady, or secretive.
Mm-hmm.
They can be resistant to change or unaccountable.
Yeah.
They can be manipulative or corrupt.
Mm-hmm.
They can be narcissistic. They're allowed to be insulting.
Mm-hmm.
They can be hateful. They have every right to be destructive or hypocritical. They can be irrational and groundless.
Mm-hmm.
They can be violent, even to the point of murderous. Beyond that, genocidal. Hitler.
Yeah.
They can have a for me or against me attitude, and they can have a nobody above me attitude. So those things a worldly leader can possess and still be a leader. But for a biblical leader, you must be determined, but not abrasive, and benevolent. Not abrasive is not harsh in nature or effect, and benevolent is compassionate consideration for others. You must be honorable. You must be transparent. You must be open-minded, willing to listen to people and what they have to say, submit to allowing people to point at where we need to improve. We must be guileless, free from any intent or to deceive or impress others. We must be empathetic and have humility. We must be complimentary and polite. We must be gentle and loving.
Yeah.
We must be constructive. We must be sincere and fault admitting. We must be slow and wise to speak and firmly grounded in Christ. We must be peaceful and submissive. We need to have the ability to see people the way Christ sees them. Jesus died on the cross for them the same he did for me. Non-believers are not my enemy. They are people just as much in need of Jesus as I am. They just don't know it yet. And we must have a Jesus above me attitude, a Jesus' word over mine attitude, and a Jesus' people above me servant attitude. So those are some of the differences in what we must be as biblical leaders and what a worldly leader can possess and still be a leader. And we've seen that all throughout history, different non-Christian believers and the way that they were.
Absolutely.
I'm pretty sure that we can calmly say that Hitler was probably not a Christ-like leader.
Yeah.
And a lot of those things that I listed off, he possessed as a worldly leader, and he was still a leader.
Yeah.
And people would argue he was a good leader.
Yeah.
He was evil, but he was good at leading people because he got a crowd behind him.
But that's where dictator comes in. That's where the difference comes in. Yeah, absolutely. That's good, dude. That's good. So now let's turn to what Scripture says a leader should look like. So we have 1 Timothy chapter 3, and I'm going to read verse 1 through 7. Here it is. Here's a trustworthy saying. Whoever aspires to be an overseer desires a noble task. Now the overseer is to be above reproach, faithful to his wife, temperate, self-controlled, respectable, hospitable, able to teach, not given to drunkenness, not violent, but gentle, not quarrelsome, not a lover of money. He must manage his own family well and see that his children obey him, and he must do so in a manner worthy of full respect. If anyone does not know how to manage his own family, how can he take care of God's church? He must not be a recent convert, or he may become conceited and fall under the same judgment as the devil. He must also have a good reputation with outsiders, so that he will not fall into disgrace and into the devil's trap. Further, I'm going to move on to chapter 4.
Can I
Yeah,
say
go
something
ahead.
about that real quick?
Yeah, for sure.
It's obviously talking about a man in the situation,
Mm-hmm.
but to all the women watching, being submissive to a godly husband is also a form of leadership. So don't
Absolutely.
think that just because the Bible's talking about a man in situation that what you're doing or your leadership cannot be just as valuable, if not more. Because if you are, if you're making his home a safe place, if you are, helping him take care of the family, and if you're doing, all these things that is enabling this man to become a better leader,
Yeah.
he will 100% be a 10 times better leader because of how good of a woman you are to him. And in that is a form of leadership through submission, like we were talking about earlier.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. That's yeah. So now I'm gonna move on to 1 Timothy chapter 4, verse 11 through 16. And it says this: command and teach these things. Don't let anyone look down on you because you are young, but set an example for the believers in speech, in conduct, in love, in faith, and in purity. Until I come, devote yourself to the public reading of Scripture, to preaching, and to teaching. Do not neglect your gift, which was given you through prophecy when the body of elders laid their hands on you. Be diligent in these matters. Give yourself wholly to them, so that everyone may see your progress. Watch your life and doctrine closely. Persevere in them, because if you do, you will save both yourself and your hearers. And so I want to. We're kind of running out of time, but I do want to break this down quickly. I think verse 12 is super important to remember, and I'll read it again real quick. Don't let anyone look down on you because you are young, but set an example for the believers in speech, in conduct, in love, in faith, and in purity. So those 5 things, speech, conduct, love, faith, and purity, are extremely important for leadership. And I think, I'm not saying I've failed miserably, but I think in certain ways lately I have failed in conduct for sure, and just being an example. I do think most of the time I do a great job of being an example, but there's always room to improve, and I've definitely been made known of that lately. So
I would say the same thing, and I would go farther than to say it's not just conduct there. I'd probably say I fell in all of those in one way or another somehow.
Yeah.
Just because I'm not perfect, at some point, I would say at some point during the week, at least one time, I could have been better in one of those ways.
Absolutely. Yeah, I could say the same thing. Absolutely. And then I want to move on to, I want to kind of break down verse 14 real quick. Do not neglect your gift, which was given you through prophecy when the body of elders laid their hands on you. And so it says, do not neglect your gift. And I think, like, one of my gifts is leadership. But if we want to be more specific, I do lead in a way of I help lead worship. And I have an important role in that sense. People see me up there every week.
Mm-hmm.
They see me up there leading worship. I have to be qualified to do that.
Yep.
You cannot lead worship and then go outside of that time and not be an example of Christ.
Someone was talking to me earlier, and he was, earlier this week, and he was talking to me about how some people the way that who they are, when not behind the pulpit, makes what they do in front of the pulpit meaningless, because people will be like, oh, well, I know who he is, not on Sunday, so I don't want to listen to what he has to say.
Yeah.
And some
becomes void.
Exactly. What they say becomes meaningless to people. And so I would say, as a leader, that's scary to think that the way that I may live my life on a day-to-day basis could disqualify what I say to people if I was to ever get up and speak or worship. And so that was very convicting, because I realized there's some things in my life that could disqualify me to people when I go and step up on that stage and speak. Or if I get behind this mic right now and if someone's watching and they know, like, oh, this or that I may have done or something like that, and they're like, oh, well, I don't want to listen to what he has to say because I've seen the way that he may choose to live when he's not behind the mic. And so for that, I would say, if you're watching this, you're 100%, you can hold me accountable to those things, and you can look at me and be like, hey, Chris, I think you need to be better in this way, or that way, and I'll be receptive, or as receptive as I can be in the moment. And if I'm not, I'll come back to you on a later date and be better.
And that's another leadership quality, is accountability.
Yeah.
Being able to hold each other accountable and take that accountability. But yeah, that was well put, bro. And I think we had some good talks about leadership today. I almost think we could have a second episode about this.
Probably could.
And we might, because I actually have a few other things in mind that I would like to go over. But now we're going to start wrapping it up. So at the end of every episode now, we plan to do a gospel presentation. It's not always going to be the same, but today Chris is going to be reading some scripture, and
it's
paraphrased, basically.
Yeah, it's not exactly
the story
out of
of
the Bible,
Jesus,
but it's just the story
of the dying on the cross.
It's just the story of the crucifixion of Jesus.
The crucifixion.
Yeah.
And so I'm gonna let him read that. We want this. We want to do this every episode, because if any of you that are watching are not sure about the faith, or don't know Jesus, or don't know the story of Jesus, and are not a Christian or not a believer, we want you to hear this, and we want to let God speak through us. We want to be a vessel for God to reach you. And so with that being said, I'm going to let Chris read that.
So everything that I've said was taken out of all four Gospels. I had to go through and look at the minor details that each Gospel tells, because not every single Gospel tells it differently. Some details are left out of some, and some are put into others. So all these, details, don't just go read John and be like, whoa, what he said, it didn't say that in John. Yeah. Because it probably says it in Luke or Mark or Matthew.
Yeah.
So, we know Jesus lived a perfect life, but while he was fully God, he was also fully human. He felt and experienced all the struggles, feelings, and pains of this world. He dealt with rejection all his life. From the very people he created, and before that took place, he was anxious and nervous about being crucified. He knew the pain he was set to endure, and even asked God to allow the cup to pass from him, if there was another way. He was anxious to the point he was sweating blood. Yet through it all, he says, "Nevertheless, not my will, but yours be done." And so he is taken away. He is imprisoned, blindfolded, mocked, spat in his face, and beaten. The people who have imprisoned him are yelling at him, saying, "Prophesy, who is it that struck you?" While also uttering other blasphemous words against him. He is sent to Herod and his soldiers, who ridicule and mock him as well, before being sent back to Pilate. His own people are shouting and demanding for him to be crucified. They want Barabbas, our murderer, to be set free on the evening before Passover over Jesus. So the evening before Passover, the Jews were allowed to set prisoner free.
Yep.
For people who don't know, and they could have set Jesus free, And he would have been guilt free. He already was, but he could have been guilt free in the eyes of them, and they chose Barabbas. They are continuing to demand that Jesus be crucified. Pilate takes Jesus, bounds him, and flogs him with the flagellum, which is made of 3 or more leather straps connected to a handle with sharp pieces of bone and lead embedded on the ends of the leather. So just how we fillet a fish, that's where we get the English word fillet from, is from the flagellum.
Really?
Yes. So, have you ever seen us literally skin a fish alive? That's what they were doing to Jesus every single time they whipped him. They'd whip him and they'd pull it back, and it would just literally, it was meant to rip the skin off of his back or wherever it is that they whipped him. So the maximum amount allowed under Jewish law is 40 lashes, although they usually only gave out 39 just in case they miscounted one. But when Jesus is being whipped, it is by the Romans, who do not have a limit on the punishment. It's believed that he was whipped at the absolute very least 39 times, though the number is uncertain. His soldiers twist together a crown of thorns and place it on his head. They place a purple robe on Jesus along with the reed, a king's staff, in his right hand. The purple robe is a way to mock him, since purple was meant for kings in that age. They salute him, mockingly saying, "Hail, King of the Jews." They were mockingly kneeling before him as they would a king. He's taken out in front of his people, the Jews, and given to them so they can crucify him. Jesus, exhausted and tired, picks up his cross, and he walks, and he walks, and he walks. And he reaches a point of human exhaustion to where he can't even carry his cross anymore. So they find a man to help carry his cross the rest of the way up to Golgotha. Finally, they steal his garments off his back and distribute them amongst each other and pin him to the cross. They stay there for the duration of 9 hours that he hangs, only giving him sour wine to drink until he breathes his last. And on the 9th hour, Jesus says, while hanging on the cross, my God, why have you forsaken me?" And after Jesus has now died, the soldiers pierce his side with a spear and outpours blood and water, signaling a man who has died of a broken heart. So whenever the Romans would crucify them, they meant to deal out the maximum amount of punishment. And since a human's mind was meant to always, fight to survive, you could only breathe if you pushed yourself up with your legs, and you would be able to get a breath of air before, going back down because you were so tired. But because your human mind was telling you to live, humans would always push themselves up, and that's why they would break your legs at the end, because that was when they would kill you. You would survive until they broke your legs, and then you wouldn't be able to push yourself back up, and you would suffocate to death. But because when Jesus he died before they had to break his legs, because we know that he didn't, and they pierced his side and outpoured blood and water. That signaled a man who gave up his life. He could have continued to keep living, because he could have pushed himself up and kept breathing, but he allowed himself to die in that moment. So that signaled a man who died of a broken heart and who gave himself up willingly instead of forcefully dying on the cross. So Jesus was certainly rejected and pushed to the point of exhaustion, yet he still did what he did out of love for us. We are called to do the same for other people because they need to hear about Jesus just as much as we do. God is calling to use us. So the question is, what are you going to do? Are you going to sit on what you know about Christ and do nothing, just sitting on the sidelines, happy to be on the team? Or are you going to take the information you have and use it to benefit the kingdom? So, that pierces my heart. It pierces the world in me.
Absolutely.
Because to know, there's 100% times that I have not fully lived out for Christ in everything that I do. And, there's people that I could have, talked to about Jesus, and who knows if that was, one of their only opportunities to know Christ, and I didn't share it with them.
Yeah.
And I won't know that until, I get to heaven, I look back on my life. But knowing that information now, I can say, Jesus, I just want to live for you in everything that I do. And I want to give everything up to you, Lord, because I don't want to have to live, or I don't have to want to go back and look at and see another moment past now where I didn't give everything to you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that what you read it painted a great picture of the significance of Jesus dying on the cross, and the crucifixion, and the significance of why we should follow him, and why we should recognize that he did that for us, because we're the ones who deserved that. We should have had those the whippings. What was it called?
It's a flogging, flagellum.
Yeah, flagellum. Yet he did that for us, And it is very important to understand the eternal significance of that. And the reason I say eternal is because knowing that and believing that and trusting, putting your faith and trust in Jesus will give you an everlasting life, will lead you to eternity. And so I hope those of you who do not know Jesus might come to know Jesus. Even if it's not through this podcast, I hope we've at least sparked a flame. And with that being said, we're going to wrap up. At the end of every episode now, we are going to also ask that you would all comment your prayer request in the comment section. And if there is a prayer, we're going to try to respond to some prayer requests. But if there are some other prayer requests that have not been answered or that we have not answered or like replied to in the comments, please reply to them. Please drop a comment on that comment. Like we want to build a community, right? We don't want this podcast to just be us posting a video every week and just talking. We want it to be a community of people that love one another and that help each other out through prayer. And so because we know we're online and everything, it's hard to actually do stuff as a community that way, but we're going to do everything possible that we possibly can to make it a community. And so please comment your prayer requests if you have them. We're going to do our best to respond to them. And then even if we do respond to some, I encourage you to respond to those as well. And so with that being said, that is it for today for this podcast. I am excited for next week because we're going to have our first guest,
yes,
bro.
Sir.
I'm so excited. I'm not going to say who it is. Y'all are just going to have to see on the next podcast.
Their name is...
yeah, you better not.
Got it.
Cut. Anyways, so we're excited for that. And then the week after that, we also have 2 more guests. And so we have a busy couple weeks coming up. And we can't wait for y'all to hear and see all that. With that being said, love y'all. Remember, like, subscribe, comment. Love y'all. Peace.
We've been looking for a breakthrough, trying our best to make do. Every day is something new, but change gon' come, oh yes, it's true. Brighter days are straight ahead. Follow me, won't be misled. Just look up, don't hang your head, and we'll get to the promised land. Somebody loves you, please don't forget such. Take your time, no need to feel rushed. We gon' shine somehow one day. Word to O'Shea, today's been a good day.